Good evening. With the time being 7:10 on this wonderful Monday evening of October 7th, I'd like to call the Government Operations Committee to order. Can I please have a roll call?
Lencioni.
Yes.
Gem.
Here.
Petrilla.
Here.
Wirball.
Here.
Bessner.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Folkaitis.
Here.
Foltz.
Here.
Bungard.
Here.
Munz.
I am looking for a motion and a second for the omnibus item.
So moved.
So moved by Gem, seconded by Wirball. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. Next up, we have item 5B. Bill Hanna, the Finance Director, will make a presentation. Bill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Weber. The first item on the agenda tonight is approval of the city's annual insurance program for the renewal year beginning December 1st, 2024, in the amount of $1,072,210. Over the last few months, city staff have been working with our broker, Marsh McLennan, on the city's upcoming renewal process, and Miranda is here from Marsh as well if there's any detailed questions. Overall, the city's renewal for the upcoming insurance coverage year is 10.4% more than the prior year. The primary factor contributing to this increase is the increase in property valuations as a result of inflation, and various things such as the cost to reconstruct have finally worked their way into our renewal. So we did see the increase in the cost of providing property valuation coverage for the upcoming year. That property coverage is roughly 33% of our total insurance renewal amount. As far as the other coverages, workers' comp actually decreased slightly over the prior year, so that was a good thing. And the cost of the other city coverages for auto, liability, inland marine, and umbrella increased moderately over the prior year. The city did market and attempt to get quotes again this year for our coverages, but the carriers couldn't beat the coverage that Travelers provided on either price or terms and coverage. The budget that was established this year was based on previous renewals of roughly 1.5% to 1.7%. So the renewal came in a little bit over budget, but we have substantial reserves in our risk management fund, as well as budget flexibility in some other budget accounts to cover the difference. So that is my summary of our insurance renewal tonight. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a question on last paragraph, since the proposed cost is 70,000 higher that. So reading the last question, we're going to use the money from the risk insurance fund to cover it?
Yeah, we have substantial reserves in the risk insurance fund to cover that amount. And we have budgetary flexibility with legal services and settlement accounts that we can cover that budget, cover the difference as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Phil, I do have one question.
Yes.
Did we, how many property claims did we have last year?
I don't think we had any. Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
With that, I'd looking for a motion and a second. So moved by Folk, seconded by Lencioni. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. That is approved. Next up, we have item 5C. Mr. Hanley, you have the floor once again.
Thank you, Chair Weber. The next item on the agenda is a recommendation to accept the financial and other reports for the fiscal year ending April 30th, 2024, including the city's annual comprehensive financial report, board communication, TIF compliance reports, single audit report, sales tax compliance report, and other items as well. I am going to introduce Jim Savio from Sikich. He is going to be discussing the city's audit process and how it went. After that, he is completed. I'll be giving a very, very short 3-slide overview on some of the key highlights and takeaways contained in the ACFR. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jim.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, everyone, for your time here tonight. I really do appreciate it. I want to start off, too, by thanking Bill and his entire staff for all of their assistance throughout the entire audit process. We were able to meet all of our key deadlines, get the reports out on time. So I want to thank them for being prepared and for their professionalism during the entire process. So what I'll do is just kind of give you a brief overview of our audit timeline. Then I'll go over, just going to focus on our reports that we issue. So the independent auditor's report, our report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters, sometimes referred to as a yellow book audit. And then I'll also talk about the management discussion and analysis, as well as our board communication report. Then I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So as far as the audit timeline, we usually kick things off in early March with the planning meeting. It's usually a couple hours. We have a 2 or 3 page agenda. It's basically just an overview, getting an overview of the year and what's gone on, any new debt issuances, intergovernmental agreements, things like that. So helps us to kind of plan our audit, but also be proactive, and if there's any obstacles that we're identifying those as early as possible. Preliminary field work is at the end of May. It's usually 3 days. We do internal control walkthroughs, which are basically we document our understanding of internal controls, do some walkthroughs of transactions of those controls, and then identify any potential issues or areas that we need to take a closer look at. We do our fraud interviews as well, read board minutes, any new intergovernmental agreements, and then after that we perform our risk assessment where we determine what risks are most prevalent, and then we kind of audit towards those risks. So that's what we do in preliminary field work. Final field work started on July 22nd. It went through August 9th. And that's where we do the bulk of our substantive testing. So our bulk of the audit's done during that time frame. And then we had an exit conference on the last day, on August 9th, with the staff. Issued draft reports 20 days after that, on August 29th, and then issued final reports on September 20th. So a little bit before our audit timeline. So we beat the audit schedule by a few days. So that's a little bit of the outline of what we do. I'll talk about the independent auditor's report. That's in the annual comprehensive financial report. It's the very first part of the financial section. And on page 1, we have our audit opinion paragraphs. Those are the first 2 paragraphs on page 1. And in the second paragraph, we give what we call an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide to the city. It just basically states that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects, the financial position of the city in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. After that, the third paragraph on page 1 just tells you that we did implement a new accounting standard, GASB Statement 96, which is subscription-based information and technology arrangements, which is sort of a fancy word for software licenses, specifically licenses greater than 1 year. So any license greater than 1 year, you're required to record a right to use capital asset and then an offsetting liability as well. So we implemented that this year. It had a little bit of an effect. I think we found 7 subscription-based information technology arrangements during the year that we recorded. And then the last thing in the independent auditor's report is in the other matters section. And this basically states what we did with the information in the annual comprehensive financial report other than the basic financial statements. So we give an opinion on the basic financial statements, and then the other matters section basically says what we did with the rest of the info. The required supplementary information, or RSI, is in the table of contents. That includes the management discussion and analysis. And basically, we do limited procedures on this information. Read it, make sure it's consistent with the basic financial statements, but not enough to give an opinion on it. The supplementary information is the combining of individual fund financial statements and schedules. That's a lot of the information in the back of the report, a lot of the budget versus actual statements. We give an in relation to opinion on this info. So basically, in relation to those basic financial statements, they're fairly stated. And then the last thing is the other information, which is the introductory and statistical sections. We don't give an opinion on this information. We do read it, make sure it's materially consistent with the basic financial statements or not otherwise materially misstated. If it were, we would ask you to restate it. And if that wasn't the case, we'd communicate that to the council. So no issues there with any of the other information. So that is the independent auditor's report. Right after that then is, like I said, is the Yellow Book opinion. This is required because you expended more than $750,000 in federal funds. You're required to have a single audit, and as part of the single audit, you're required to have a Yellow Book audit as well. So this is basically a report, like I said, on internal control of our financial reporting. And at the very bottom of page 5, our report says basically that there were no material weaknesses. So there are also no significant deficiencies or deficiencies noted. And then our testing on compliance and other matters, basically we found no instances of non-compliance during our testing. And the last thing I'll talk about in the annual comprehensive financial report is the MD&A, which is, it's prepared by the city, it's not prepared by us. And it's just a great overview of the city's financial position and changes in financial position. It'll point out any significant trends or changes that occurred during the year. And it has some 2-year comparative data that you can't find elsewhere in the report. So really encourage you, if you read one thing, read the MD&A in the annual comprehensive financial report. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the report that we issue, the auditor's communication to the mayor and the members of the city council. And I'll start on the table of contents. There's some required communication that we have to have with the council each year. That's required by auditing standards. That's on pages 2 through 4. We did communicate that we implemented GASB Statement 96, but otherwise, pretty routine communication. I didn't have any disagreements with management. Like I said, no delays with the audit. So pretty routine communication there. We did find one audit adjusting journal entry. That's on page 5. That wasn't material, but we are required to communicate that to City Council. We also didn't have any past adjusting journal entries. These are entries that were deemed to be immaterial and weren't recorded, but above a certain level, certain floor, we have to communicate that to City Council. So didn't have any past adjusting journal entries, so the one entry that we found was recorded. And then finally, on page 7, we have communication of deficiencies in internal control and other comments to management. Like I said, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and also no new deficiencies this year. And then finally, on page 11 is the status of the comments from the prior year. And you'll notice that the 2 comments from the prior year were considered implemented in the current year. So those will be removed from the report next year. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have on these 2 reports or any of the reports also that Bill commented on as well, or pointed out to you as well that we issued.
Great. Jim, thank you for the presentation. I'll now open it up to any questions anyone has on the council. Go ahead, Bob.
Just a general question, Jim, and thank you all for your work. I know I jumped in on one of your audit meetings when I was meeting with Bill.
Yeah.
So thank you for your work. What was the value of adopting the new GASB thing for the software application? The asset and the liability? What was the value of those 7 things you found?
That's a good question. Some will say that there's no value. It basically,
technology was probably obsolete before we got it.
Yeah, so we implemented leases last year. So that was for the first time you recorded. Similar to the same thing on the lessee side, where you never recorded a lease before, a long-term lease. Now you record an asset and a liability for those payments. So this is kind of along the same lines. It's the same thing, except it relates to software licenses greater than a year. So it's kind of being consistent with how you treat both of them.
Right.
You're treating them both the same way. So previously, for both of them, it was kind of like off-balance sheet financing. Didn't show up in your balance sheet anywhere. You'd have an expense each year that you'd record, and maybe you'd have a footnote on it, but otherwise it was, not on the financial statement. So it's kind of putting it on the face of the balance sheet and saying, hey, these are, so in some cases, they're considerable, commitments and liabilities for future payments that previously weren't, recorded on the balance sheet. So that's kind of the idea behind it. So it was a lot of work. It was a heavy lift for the last 2 years implementing them. You can ask Bill and his staff how much man hours they put into it, but it was a significant undertaking. And it's moving forward. It's still going to be a decent amount of work, but
just keep track of it each year, especially if they're longer than a year with all the new
exactly
technology that Larry and the IS people are putting in. I'm sure that that number could continue to grow, but now we're tracking it separately with the balance sheet.
Yeah, it's not something you got to track new ones, but you also got to track any changes in existing ones as well. Did the terms change? Did you decide to exercise an option that you didn't think you were going to in the previous year? So, yeah, it's a significant amount of work. But
Great, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Looking for a motion in a second to place the reports on file. Pardon me? Oh, sure, Bill, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You got it? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Just wanted to provide a really brief update on some of the key takeaways from the ACFR. I know we covered a lot of things at the workshop, so I just wanted to highlight a few things that we might have touched on, but a couple things we might not have for this evening. Overall, the city's long-term financial position improved last year. We had an increase in net position of $31.8 million to $314 million. Of which $243 million is the city's net investment in capital assets, net of related debt, which increased roughly $13 million from the prior year. That's going to be the worst sounding thing I'm saying over these three slides in terms of technical accounting language, because that's looking at the city's long-term economic position. Did it improve from one year to the next year? And from a long-term focus, it did improve. Total sales taxes attributed to the general fund increased for the third consecutive year from $26.4 million to $28.6 million. That was before sales tax rebates, which also increased about $1.2 million over the prior year. So some of that was a rebate back to developers, but still overall a very strong sales tax increase over the prior year. Income, alcohol, hotel taxes, those had moderate increases over the prior year as well. And we discussed the change in the net change in fund balance for the city's general fund back on the workshop, similar to the exact same table from last time. Some of the reasons for that change was the additional pension contributions the city made in the total amount of $1.355 million, the additional transfer from general fund to the water fund of $2.6 million and $300,000 to sewer, and $1.2 million transfer to the capital projects fund. Those transfers, in addition to normal transfers out for debt payment-related purposes, contributed to the total of the $10.2 million transfers out that you see there, which is why we have the overall net change of just under $1 million in the negative. That reduced our overall unassigned fund balance metric as a percentage of expenditures and transfers out from 46.1% to 41% at the end of the fiscal year. We touched on it a little bit last time, but overall we made good progress in the funding of our police and fire pension systems. The percentage funded of the net pension liability increased from 63.9% to 68.3% for fire and 48.8% to 53.9% for police due to good market returns in the prior year and the additional city contributions that were made. The updated actuarial evaluations, which calculated those above numbers, reflects only a 0.5% increase in the upcoming police and fire required city contributions that will be incorporated as part of the overall 2024 tax levy discussion coming up in a couple weeks. The capital project fund reserve increased to $12.6 million. Obviously, we've been spending that on a lot of key infrastructure projects in the city. And the First Street Plaza Fund that was opened and funds transferred and contributions received towards that project that will be closed out this current fiscal year once the remaining punch list type items are complete. The total general obligation debt outstanding decreased from $101.9 million to $95.1 million, and that projected to decrease to $88.5 million in the current year. Lastly, just a couple of quick notes on our enterprise funds. Total IEPA loans increased from $61.7 million to $68.9 million. That's due to the ongoing projects and the issuance of new loan obligations. We paid off about $3.5 million, I believe, in the last year, so that's sort of a net increase with those IEPA loans. Our electric fund reported positive net change of $11.4 million during the year and ended the year with an unrestricted net position of $52 million, while user charges for the electric utility remained stable. They went from $60.9 million to $60.2 million. Unrestricted net position is a somewhat similar equivalent of fund balance in proprietary enterprise funds, so there are some differences, but it's a close measure of what that is. Our water fund net income for the year was essentially break even at $227,000. After we had general fund transfer $2.6 million to that, we did see an increase in the unrestricted net position of the water fund to about $7.1 million. User charges in the water fund also increased from $8.6 to $9.4 million for the year. The sewer fund had a total change in net position of just about $2.7 million and ended the year with an unrestricted net position of $15.6 million. User charges in the sewer fund increased from $11.8 million to $12.5 million in the current year. As we talked about before, we are using, or we budgeted to use, a substantial amount of those reserves in the current year to fund the various water and sewer capital projects to get some of those capital projects done. So that was my promise of a quick 5-minute overview on a few takeaways. I'm happy to take any questions.
Go ahead, Paul.
What was last year's sales tax rebate? Do you know?
Roughly $1.6 million or so.
Okay, so it's pretty stable. So the increase shows through. That's great.
Any other questions? Okay, looking for a motion again in a second. All righty. So I have a motion by Gem, seconded by Lencioni. Roll call, please.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Gem.
Yes.
Petrilla.
Yes.
Wirbal.
Yes.
Festner.
Yes.
Fokitis.
Yes.
Folks.
Yes.
Weingart.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Next up, we have item 5D. Once again, Bill Hanna is going to make a presentation.
Thank you again, Chair Weber. The next item is a recommendation to approve an ordinance terminating the designation of the St. Charles Mall redevelopment project area of the City of St. Charles as a tax increment financing redevelopment project area and dissolving the special tax increment allocation fund for that said redevelopment project area. So a little background, on June 19th, 2000, the city created the St. Charles Mall TIF district. This TIF was created to redevelop the old mall generally located at Randall Road and Route 38, roughly site about 27 acres. The city issued roughly $2.9 million in bonds to help assist with funding those redevelopment activities and advanced or transferred roughly $1.7 million to assist as well. There were several different proposals over the years for the site, and eventually the Prairie Center project was approved in 2017, consisting of 670 residential apartment units, a clubhouse, commercial, and various mixed uses. Many of those buildings have been fully constructed. The development of this site resulted in a significant EAV growth on the property, with about $19.5 million in incremental EAV created through the 2023 tax levy year. This has resulted in a significant increase in increment from roughly $100,000 in 2016 to $1.5 million in 2023. As a result of this growth, the city has been able to retire the debt obligations and repay the city for the amounts advanced and transferred over the years. This TIF has now reached its 23-year statutory life, and an ordinance formally terminating the TIF is being presented for consideration. Current estimates from the county indicate that the incremental EAV has now increased to over $26 million. So once terminated, this EAV will now be accessible for all taxing districts as they move forward in their 2024 levy process. In addition, the city has roughly $775,000 left over in the St. Charles Mall TIF 3 fund that is not needed for any purpose and will be returned to the applicable taxing districts as part of this process. So that is my overall summary and introduction. So again, happy for questions.
Any questions for item 5B? No? Okay, looking for a motion.
Move for approval.
Moved by Wirbal, seconded by Petrilla. Roll call, please.
Lenzerdi,
Yes.
Ginn,
Yes.
Petrilla,
Yes.
Wirbal,
Yes.
Messner,
Yes.
Kulkaitis,
Yes.
Foltz,
Yes.
Lundgaard.
Yes.
That item carries. Thank you very much. Lastly, we have item 5E. Bill Hanna, you still have the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair Weber. Whatever item number it was, is an ordinance terminating, resolution showing city support for the extension of the First Street TIF district for an additional 12 years. Sorry about that. As the council is aware, staff has been involved in many discussions and presentations with various taxing bodies, explaining the history of the First Street TIF and the reasoning as to why the city is looking for an extension of that TIF for an additional 12 years to be authorized through state legislation. Again, for background, the city established the First Street TIF back in March of 2002 in order to facilitate the redevelopment of the city's downtown along the west side of the river. The city issued a total of $28.9 million in bonds from 2006 to 2008 to provide assistance with funding for portions of the public infrastructure and various other aspects of that project. While the first two phases were complete, the largest phase was put on hold because of the severe economic impacts of the Great Recession, resulting in no activity for roughly a 7-year period. This resulted in a significant decline and elimination of the additional EAV that was expected to be generated in order to provide the additional increment for the project. The city did a couple things to try and address the impacts. The downtown TIF number 7 was created in order to provide another redevelopment tool for the downtown and provide some additional financing option to assist with the payment of the obligations of the First Street TIF. The city also did a refinancing on the general obligation bonds with maturity dates set farther into future, and those bonds were refinanced again in 2021 with a final payment to coincide with the 2037 tax levy year, which is the same as the expiration of the current downtown TIF number 7. Currently, there remains roughly $24 million in principal outstanding on the original $28.9 million in bonds. The 2023 TIF increment that was received by the city was $498,439. As we've been having these discussions and conversations, we have been looking to extend this TIF district for an additional 12 years in order to complete the redevelopment goals of the TIF district and provide the financing necessary to repay the original obligations. So far, we have received letters of support via presentations that myself, Derek Conley, and Heather have been doing over the last several months. Those letters of support have included the library, park district, school district, college district, and the township. This process is ongoing with future meetings this week with remaining bodies. So the attached resolution would show that the city is supporting the extension of the First Street TIF district. One provision that's been added to the resolution is if at such a point in time the First Street TIF accumulates enough TIF increment to satisfy all the remaining repayment obligations on the bonds, the city would look to terminate this TIF district early. So that is my overall summary. It's been a long process, and we are happy to continue discussions. Heather, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, just one quick thing that I wanted to add is this question came from some of the taxing districts, just to be clear that this can only be approved by legislation at the state level. We're working to get this on the veto session. Senator DeWitt is prepared to introduce this for us, but it would have to be in by the end of this month, which is why we've been doing this in the timeline in which we have.
Any questions? Go ahead, Brian.
Is Kane County involved with this? Do they have to, and where are they at?
Correct. So both the Forest Preserve and the county are the two remaining districts that we're waiting on approval for. We are presenting to them tomorrow morning for a vote.
Okay, all right.
Just a quick question. Bill, regarding that 498,000 TIF increment, is that something you see that's going to like propel slowly on average over the next 12 years, or do you see where that's going, I guess?
That's a really good question. So a lot of factors could be involved in that. Sure. I think the trend generally with some of those things has been an upward trend, but you never know when you're going to have something happen that's going to kind of move it the other way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Looking for a...
Move for approval.
Motion second. Moved by Wirball, seconded by Gem. Roll call, please.
Benzioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrilla?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Festner?
Yes.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folds?
Yes.
Von Gart?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item, it says on the agenda, Police Department. I don't think we need anything from that. Then Community and Economic Development? No. Public comment. Any public comment tonight? I do not see any. Any additional items from mayor, council, or staff? I do not see anything. We have no need for executive session tonight, so I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So-
Moved by Wirball, seconded by
Second.
Petrilla. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Nay. All right, the ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Now celebrate the chief. Thank you.